My name is Martin Hale. I'm 52 years old, and I've spent the last 29 of those years working in freight logistics for a company called Westbridge Supply out of Portbridge, Oregon. I coordinate the movement of things most people don't think about: building materials, generators, factory parts. Boring stuff to some, but I like it. I solve problems. I make sure things show up where and when they're supposed to. And yet, after 25 years of marriage, my wife Clarissa decided to announce, in front of our entire extended family, friends, and a few old professors, that I was the biggest mistake she ever made. It happened during our son Eli's graduation dinner. We'd booked a private room at Harbor and Oak, the nicest restaurant in Portbridge, because that's what you do when your kid finishes college with honors. You celebrate. You make a memory. I wore a jacket and tie. Clarissa wore this deep red dress I hadn't seen before. She looked radiant, honestly. I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. I stood up to give a toast. I had this short speech prepared, nothing too emotional, just proud father things. Clarissa was already holding a glass of champagne, nodding along politely. And then, as I finished with "To Eli, the pride of our lives," she cut in. "You know what, Martin?" she said, loud enough that the forks stopped clinking. "I can't keep pretending anymore." I froze, still holding the stem of my glass. "I've outgrown this," she said, waving a hand vaguely toward me. "All of it. You. This marriage. I've spent half my life waiting for you to change, to become someone exciting. Someone who actually lives." People were stunned. My sister Ivy put her fork down mid-bite. Eli looked like someone had just unplugged the air around him. Even the waiter pouring wine at the next table paused, bottle tilted, mouth open. "I deserve more than a man who talks about shipping routes and inventory control like it's the highlight of his day," Clarissa went on. "I've found someone who sees me, who pushes me to grow. His name is Jackson, and he's my wellness coach." There he was, Jackson, sitting alone at the bar like some kind of smug lifeboat waiting to carry her off to enlightenment. Tan, young, smug, wearing a linen shirt unbuttoned just far enough to make it a problem. Clarissa looked proud of herself, as if she'd just dropped a bomb made of truth and freedom. She wanted gasps. She wanted drama. She wanted me to unravel. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope. I didn't say a word, just walked over, placed it in front of her plate, and said, calmly, "This is for you." Her fingers hovered over it like she wasn't sure if it was a gift or a grenade. I stepped back. Everyone was watching. "What is this?" she asked. "Go ahead. Open it." She did. And that's when the real silence fell. Not the silence of shock. The silence of impact. I could see it in her face. The shift from arrogance to confusion, then confusion to panic. Her hands started to tremble. Her eyes darted across the pages, lips moving silently as she read. She looked up at me, voice suddenly brittle. What is this, Martin?" "You said you wanted to be seen," I said. "So I thought it was time everyone saw the whole picture." That was the moment the energy shifted. The smugness faded from her face. Even Jackson turned in his seat, suddenly very aware of just how many eyes were on him. But I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice, because the show was just beginning, and I wasn't the one performing anymore. If I'm being honest, I think I knew something was off long before that night at Harbor and Oak. It started subtle. Clarissa began going to the gym more often, not just a few times a week, but nearly every day, sometimes twice. She'd never been a fitness junkie before. Now she had protein shakes in the fridge, strange powders in the pantry, and a shelf full of supplements I couldn't pronounce. Then came the new clothes. First, it was just workout gear. Then the heels got higher, dresses tighter, perfume bolder. She smiled more, but not at me. She started using phrases I'd never heard from her in 25 years of marriage. "I'm trying to align with who I really am." Or, "Jackson says growth can't happen without discomfort." Jackson. That name started creeping into casual conversations like a shadow under a door. "Jackson says I should journal more." "Jackson thinks I might be too accommodating." "Jackson thinks." "Jackson believes." "Jackson recommends." Who was I in all that? I had become the audience to a performance I never bought tickets for. We'd been married since we were both 27. We met at a regional logistics seminar in Portland. Not exactly the setting for a fairy tale, but we clicked. She worked in marketing back then. Bright, ambitious. She dreamed big. I didn't. I was steady, practical. I never promised her fireworks. Just warmth, safety, stability. For a long time, that was enough. We built a life modest, honest. I went to work. She bounced between part-time jobs, tried a few ventures that didn't stick. When Eli was born, she stayed home. I picked up extra hours, double shifts, missed a few birthdays and school plays, but I figured it was worth it. I was building something. Looking back now, I think she started drifting when Eli left for college. It was like the space he left behind echoed too loud for her. She said she felt unseen. I didn't know how to answer that. I thought doing right by our family, paying the bills, being home every night, keeping our life intact, was the way I said, I see you. But maybe that wasn't the language she wanted anymore. I wasn't suspicious at first, just unsettled. I'd ask her about her day, and she'd answer with vague phrases or deflect entirely. It's hard to explain, she'd say. Or worse, you wouldn't get it. She stopped talking about the future. No more dreams about retirement or that trip to Scotland we used to laugh about. She started talking about what's next for me. Never us, just her. That was when the silence between us changed. It used to be peaceful, the kind of quiet you build over years with someone you trust. But now it was heavy, like we were both waiting for something to crack. I didn't explode. I didn't accuse her. I just watched. Sometimes people assume that quiet means ignorance. But sometimes it just means you're waiting to see if what you think is true really is. I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Not then. But the foundation had already started to shift. I just hadn't decided whether I was going to fix it or get out of the way when it finally collapsed. It wasn't one moment that changed everything. It was a series of small confirmations, each one nudging my gut instinct closer to certainty. The hotel receipt was the tipping point. Clarissa had said she was going to a wellness retreat in Bend, Oregon, over a weekend when I thought she was visiting her sister. I didn't question it, not out loud. But when I was cleaning the counter on Monday morning, I saw a folded slip of paper sticking out from the side pocket of her gym bag. It was a printed confirmation for a boutique hotel in Ashgrove. 2 hours in the opposite direction. 1 room, 2 guests, 2 spa passes. Check-in date, last Friday. Check-out, Sunday morning. No mention of a seminar.
No brochure.
No notebook filled with health tips. I remember just standing there, holding that receipt, staring at it like it might suddenly rewrite itself into something innocent. I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention it. She was humming in the bathroom, doing her makeup like nothing had changed. And in a way, nothing had not yet. But something in me finally clicked. Up to that point, I had been operating under the illusion that if I worked hard enough, paid the bills, showed up, things would hold. That marriage was a contract you honored by not quitting, no matter how tired you were. But contracts have clauses, and people break them all the time. That night, I called Kendrick Myers, an old friend from my softball league, who also happened to be a sharp-as-nails attorney. We'd had a few beers together over the years. Coached Little League when Eli was younger. Trustworthy guy. I told him I had a hypothetical. He saw through it instantly. Martin, he said, if you're even thinking about protecting your assets, you need to start now. Quietly. Don't tip your hand. He walked me through what was possible, what was legal, what was smart. I didn't even know where to begin, but Kendrick had answers. I learned about revocable trusts, about financial partitioning, about how postnuptial agreements hold up in court, especially when there's a pattern of deception. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning for impact. You see, I wasn't angry. Not really. Anger is loud and hot. What I felt was cold, focused, like flipping a switch in my brain from husband to strategist. I started with the basics. Moved my pay deposits into a separate account Clarissa didn't know about. Set up a trust in Eli's name. Not to punish her, but to protect what I'd built for my son. Over the next few weeks, I went through our financial history like an auditor. I didn't tell Eli. I didn't even tell Ivy. Just Kendrick, who quietly filed the right paperwork, drafted the right protections, and made sure everything was in place, just in case. Clarissa was more distracted than ever. She smiled at her phone, took calls outside, told me she was going to breathwork circles and sacred body nights. I didn't ask questions. I nodded, made dinner, mowed the lawn, played the part of the oblivious husband. But inside I was taking notes, and I kept that hotel receipt, tucked away in a folder marked wills and taxes. The irony wasn't lost on me. That piece of paper was more than proof. It was the moment the story changed. I no longer needed to find out whether she was leaving me. I just needed to decide how she was going to land when she did. The morning of Eli's graduation felt like the calm before a storm I'd been tracking for weeks. Clarissa was humming in the kitchen, frying eggs like it was just another Saturday. She wore that red silk blouse she saves for special occasions, hair curled, eyes bright. She was radiant, in the way actors are radiant just before the curtain rises. She moved around the kitchen like a woman who had already rehearsed every moment of the day in her mind. "We should leave around 5, she said, sipping her smoothie. "Traffic on the bridge gets nasty after 4:30. I nodded. "Sure. Harbor and Oak has that private room I requested," she added, glancing at her phone. "It's going to be a perfect night. I want everything to feel elevated, you know?" "Absolutely," I said, watching her try on pride like a brand new coat. She smiled, but I noticed she barely looked me in the eyes. Just past me, over my shoulder, through me, like she was already gone and hadn't told her body yet. I had stayed quiet for months, moved the money, prepped the documents, had Kendrick double-check everything for legal airtightness. We pulled the old post-nup from the refinance files. Clarissa's signature was clean and sharp on every line. The clauses were clear. Infidelity voided access to shared assets. We just needed timing. And now I had it. 3 nights earlier, I transferred the title of our house into Eli's name. Not a flashy move, just smart estate planning on paper. The trust fund went live that morning, loaded with what used to be our shared savings. I was still living under the same roof, drinking the same coffee, but legally, my world had shifted miles away from hers. That envelope, the one I kept in my jacket pocket during dinner, held 3 documents. 1. A notarized copy of our postnuptial agreement signed 5 years ago. 2. Statements showing the transfers of major assets. 3. A formal notice revoking her access to all joint financial accounts, effective the following morning. Each page was carefully worded, each sentence ironclad. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Clarissa continued flitting through the house, rehearsing her role. She talked about speeches and seating arrangements, asked what I thought she should say about Eli's future. I gave short answers, supportive enough to keep things moving, but distant enough to avoid choking on my own silence. I watched her closely that day, how much effort she put into the performance. The proud wife, the doting mother, the woman holding it all together. And in a way I pitied her, because I knew she thought tonight was going to be her moment, her big reveal, her clean break, her triumphant transformation in front of friends and family, dropping the mask and walking into her new life with Jackson waiting in the wings. But that's the thing about performances. Sometimes the script doesn't end where the actor thinks it will, and sometimes the audience sees through the whole show. As I buttoned my jacket and slipped the envelope into the inner pocket, I didn't feel nervous. I felt prepared. Clarissa opened the envelope like she expected it to hold a love letter, or maybe an apology. Her fingers moved slow, deliberate, as if the paper might explode. I watched her eyes scan the first page. First, nothing. Then her eyebrows knit together. Her lips parted slightly. She blinked once, twice. By the time she got to the second page, the color had drained from her face. Her jaw clenched. Her hands started to shake. Just a tremble, but enough to rattle the champagne glass in front of her. The room was silent. You could hear forks resting on plates, glasses being set down with more care than usual. Even the staff had stopped moving. Somewhere in the corner, Eli froze mid-sentence, staring across the table with a confused look I'll never forget. "What is this?" Clarissa asked, but her voice was different now, brittle, like glass under pressure. "The full story," I said, "since you wanted to share everything tonight." She glanced down again, flipping to the third page with a jerk of her wrist. Her fingers fumbled the edge of the paper. I could see her mouth forming the names on the title transfer: our house, the lake cabin, the savings fund. All in Eli's name. She whispered something, probably a curse, but no one could hear it. "You bastard!" She finally spat, loud and sharp. Her voice cut through the dining room like a fire alarm. "You absolute bastard!" All heads turned toward us. Conversations stopped. A couple at the next table looked up from their wine, eyes wide. Eli stared at her, stunned. My sister Ivy put a hand over her mouth. Kendrick, seated just one chair down, adjusted his napkin with surgical precision. "Is there a problem here?" a waiter asked gently, stepping closer. Clarissa stood abruptly, waving the papers in the air like a flag of war. "My husband just..." She stopped mid-sentence. I could see the realization hit her. If she explained what the documents were, she'd also be explaining why they existed. The affair, the hidden plans, the betrayal she thought was hers to control. "Please," I said quietly. "You're making a scene." She laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was sharp, bitter, the laugh of someone who just realized the stage lights are pointed the wrong way. "I'm making a scene?" she snapped. "You planned this. You sat there and planned this." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She looked around the room, at Eli, at Ivy, at Kendrick, at her own mother, who had flown in from out of state for the occasion. And then she saw Jackson, sitting at the bar, half-turned, trying to blend in like a kid hiding in the wrong classroom. "You knew I was going to..." She started again, but stopped short. "Knew you were going to what?" I asked, calm as ever. She couldn't answer, because finishing that sentence meant admitting the truth. And for the first time in a long time, Clarissa didn't seem to know what to say. Clarissa stood there, clutching the documents like they were burning her hands. The silence around the table was thick. No clinking glasses, no idle chatter. Just tension, sharp and humming. Everyone was watching, but she wasn't looking at them anymore. She was staring at Jackson. "Tell them," she barked, voice shaking. "Tell them what we talked about." He looked like a man trying to sink into his barstool. Clarissa took a step toward him. "Jackson, say it. Tell them how much better you are than..." "Clarissa," he interrupted softly, "maybe this isn't the time." That's when I knew. They had rehearsed this. She had imagined him standing beside her, hand on her shoulder, ready to declare their brave new chapter. Maybe even a toast. Her grand escape. The woman who had finally found herself. But Jackson wasn't built for impact. He was built for smooth entries and quiet exits. And this wasn't quiet. "This isn't what we talked about," she hissed, turning back to me, eyes blazing. This is manipulation. You can't just transfer everything and blindside me like this." "I didn't blindside you," I said. "I protected myself. Quietly. Legally. Everything in there is based on the agreement you signed." Kendrick, still seated, added without looking up, "Clarissa, the postnup is enforceable. You signed voluntarily, with your own lawyer present." "This can't be legal," she said. But now her voice was slipping, less fire, more frost. She looked toward her mother, seated beside Eli. "Mom!" Her mother didn't speak, just stared at her, lips pressed tight. "Clarissa," I said calmly, "maybe you should finish reading, especially page 3. She flipped it almost angrily. I watched her eyes land on the asset list. The house, the savings, the boat, the cabin, all legally transferred into Eli's name, effective the day before. She froze. Her mouth opened, closed. "The house is Eli's?" she whispered. "As of yesterday," I said, "along with everything else you thought you could leverage." She sank into her chair, not out of grace, out of shock. Her hands fell to her lap. The papers dangled from her fingers like forgotten confetti. Eli finally broke the silence. "Dad," he said, quietly, "what's happening?" I looked at him, at this smart, kind young man who had just watched his family unravel over dessert. "Your mother has made some choices," I said. "I just made sure those choices wouldn't destroy you with me." Clarissa didn't move. She wasn't angry anymore. She was small, diminished, like someone watching a tower fall that she didn't think could be touched. She looked up at me with a voice that barely carried. "When? What? When did you know?" Could have lied. Told her it was recent. But lies were her currency. I had no reason to use it anymore. "The hotel receipt," I said. "Ashgrove. 6 weeks ago." A pause. Then, from the end of the table, her mother finally spoke. "What hotel receipt?" Clarissa flinched like the question was a slap. And just like that, the fantasy cracked wide open. "It's been 6 months since that night at Harbor and Oak. The house is quieter now. Not empty. Just peaceful. Eli still lives here for now. He's taking grad school classes online while deciding between 2 programs out of state. We take turns cooking, fixing things around the yard. We don't talk about that night much. We don't need to." Clarissa called a few days after the dinner. Said she wanted to talk things through. "There's still time," she told me over the phone. "We can fix this." I was in my office at Westbridge, lining up a freight delivery for a client in Spokane. I didn't even stop typing. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "Jackson and it's not working. He says I'm too serious. Too old." "That sounds like a you problem," I said. "Martin, please. I made a mistake." "You made a series of choices," I replied. "Deliberate ones. And now you get to live with them." A week later, her lawyer reached out, said she wanted to dispute the postnup, claimed she signed it under pressure. Kendrick laughed out loud when I told him. He'd been in the room when she signed, so had 2 bank officers. Her own lawyer had reviewed every clause with her. It never made it to court. Clarissa walked away with what she brought into the marriage. Her car, her clothes, and the debt she racked up on our joint card buying Jackson a smartwatch, gym gear, and a weekend in Napa. The rest stayed with Eli. She showed up once after that. Stood on the porch of the house she no longer owned and asked to talk. Said she didn't have anywhere to go. I told her gently but firmly to leave. And for once, she did. Eli asked me once if I missed her. I thought about it longer than I expected to. "I miss the version of her I thought I knew," I said. "But I don't miss the woman who stood in front of our family and tried to burn our life down with a speech." He didn't say anything, just nodded and handed me a cold beer as we sat on the porch. That night, the sun set slow over the yard we'd spent the weekend cleaning up. It looked better than it had in years. Healthier. Honest. Clarissa calls Eli every once in a while. She's working part-time at a fitness center in Hillside, the next town over. She always asks if he'll talk to me about holidays. He always tells her the same thing. "You made your choice." And she did. She traded a life for a fantasy, a future for a fling, a family for attention. And now, she gets to see what's left when the applause dies down and the audience goes home. As for me, I've got my peace, my son, my house, my fence is fixed, my coffee's hot, and for the first time in years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Inspired by real stories from inside the engineering world. Subscribe for more engineering stories, lessons, and quiet victories.